My son told me to stop worrying my pretty little head about the bills. Exactly 1 hour after I discovered he had secretly scheduled a transfer out of my life savings. 2 days later, he was calling me, screaming that there had been a glitch because his card was declined in front of the entire sales team. He thought my age made me senile, weak, and ready for the nursing home he was planning to put me in. But he didn't know that I wasn't napping in the sunroom. I was listening, and I had spent those 48 hours setting a trap that would leave him with nothing but a $5 bill and a locked door. Before I tell you exactly how I did it, I just want to thank you for listening to an old woman's story. If you believe that wisdom gets sharper with age and that justice is best served by those who are underestimated, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe and maybe tell me which city you're listening from. Your support tells me I'm not alone. My name is Evelyn Caswell, and I am 72 years old. If you looked at my life from the outside, you would think I had it all. I live in Naples, Florida, in a house that I paid off 15 years ago. My husband, God rest his soul, worked hard so that I wouldn't have to worry about money in my twilight years. I have a view of the palm trees from my kitchen window, and until 3 months ago, I had something even more valuable than money. I had peace. But peace is fragile. It doesn't take much to break it. All it takes is a knock on the door and a sob story. 3 months ago, my son Julius and his wife, Ruby, stood on my porch. They had bags under their eyes and suitcases in their hands. Julius told me his business had failed. He said they had lost the apartment. He said they had nowhere else to go. He cried, and because I am a mother, I opened the door. I told them it would be okay. I told them they could stay until they got back on their feet. That was my first mistake. You know, they say guests are like fish. After 3 days, they start to stink. Well, it has been 90 days, and the smell is unbearable. They didn't come here to get back on their feet. They came here to take mine out from under me. It started small. It always does. I walked into my living room last Tuesday. I remember the day because it was the day I realized I was becoming a stranger in my own home. The air conditioning was blasting. I keep my house at 75 degrees. It is comfortable, and it keeps the electric bill reasonable. But when I walked in, I was shivering. The thermostat was set to 68. Ruby was sprawled out on my recliner, the one my husband used to sit in. She was on her phone, not even looking up. "Ruby," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's freezing in here. Did you touch the thermostat?" She didn't even lower her phone. She just sighed, like I was interrupting something important. "It's humid, Evelyn. Julius sweats when he sleeps. We need it cooler." "I pay the electric bill, Ruby," I said, "and 68 is too low." She finally looked at me, and there was this look in her eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was annoyance. "Fine," she said, rolling her eyes. "We'll just suffer then." She didn't offer to pay the difference. She didn't apologize. She just made me feel like I was the unreasonable one. Later that afternoon, I was in the kitchen making tea. I like my kitchen. It's not modern, but it's clean. I have oak cabinets that have stood the test of time. Ruby walked in, poured herself a glass of water from the fridge, and leaned against the counter. She looked around the room with a sour expression. "You know," she said, "these cabinets really date the place. If you painted them white and added some brass hardware, it would increase the property value. For when you eventually sell." I set my teacup down. "I am not selling, Ruby. I am living here." She shrugged. "I'm just saying, it looks like a museum in here. And that sofa in the den, it smells like dust. You really should update things. Julius deserves a nice place to relax after all the stress he's under." My blood started to boil. Julius deserves. My son hasn't looked for a job in 6 weeks. He spends his days networking on the golf course or sitting on the patio drinking my wine. But the worst comment came 2 days ago. We were eating dinner, a pot roast I bought cooked and served. Julius was eating like he hadn't seen food in days. Mom, Julius said, wiping gravy off his chin. Ruby and I were thinking, your knees aren't what they used to be. I looked at him. My knees are fine. Julius, I walk 2 miles every morning. Sure, he said quickly, but stairs are dangerous. We were thinking maybe it would be safer for you to move into the guest room downstairs. Just to be proactive. Then Ruby and I could take the master suite upstairs. It has more room for our things, and you wouldn't have to risk a fall. I stopped eating. The master suite. My room. The room I shared with his father. The room that has my sanctuary, my bathtub, my reading nook. They didn't want to protect me from falling. They wanted the big room. They wanted the view. I am staying in my room, I said firmly. The table went silent. Julius looked at Ruby, and Ruby looked down at her plate, shaking her head as if I was being a stubborn child. That night, I couldn't sleep. I started thinking about other things, little things that didn't add up. I usually get my bank statements in the mail on the 4th of every month. I like to sit down with my coffee and balance my checkbook. It's a habit. It keeps me sharp. But for the last 2 months, the blue envelope from the bank hasn't arrived. The next morning, I confronted Julius in the hallway. Julius, have you seen my bank mail? It hasn't come. He didn't make eye contact. He was adjusting his watch. A new watch, I noticed. Oh, that, he said casually. I switched you to paperless billing. Mom, it's safer. Thieves steal mail these days. I set it up so the statements go to my email. I'll let you know if anything looks weird. I didn't ask you to do that. I said, I want my paper statements. He laughed and patted my shoulder. It was a patronizing pat. Mom, relax. You don't need to stress about numbers at your age. Let me handle the heavy lifting. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. Don't worry your pretty little head. That phrase rang in my ears all day. It was the same thing his father used to say when he bought me a surprise gift. But coming from Julius, it felt different. It felt like a leash. I needed to clear my head, so I did what I always do when I'm frustrated. I cleaned. Ruby and Julius certainly weren't doing it. The kitchen trash was overflowing. I tied up the bag and hauled it out to the garage. As I was putting the bag into the large bin, the plastic snagged and tore open. Coffee grounds and paper spilled out onto the garage floor. Great, I muttered. Just great. I bent down to scoop up the mess. I was grabbing a handful of wet paper towels when something glossy caught my eye. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a job application. It was a brochure. I wiped the coffee grounds off the cover. It was for a Mercedes-Benz dealership right here in Naples. A brand new 2025 S-Class sedan. The car on the cover was silver, sleek, and cost more than my first house. I opened it. Inside, circled in red marker, was the fully loaded model, and right next to the price tag, in Ruby's distinct, looping handwriting, were words that made my stomach drop. Perfect for the new lifestyle. I stared at that paper. My hands started to shake. Julius told me they were broke. He told me they lost everything. He told me he couldn't even afford to pay for the groceries. People who are broke don't shop for six-figure cars. People who are broke don't talk about a new lifestyle. Unless the money wasn't coming from a job. Unless the money was coming from me. I stood up, clutching that dirty brochure. The heat of the garage felt suffocating. They weren't just entitled house guests. They were predators. And I was the prey. I realized then that paperless billing wasn't about safety. It was about blindness. They didn't want me to see. I walked back into the house, washed my hands, and looked at them sitting in the living room watching TV. They didn't even look up. They thought they had won. They thought I was just a confused old woman who would do whatever she was told. I went to my room and closed the door. I didn't cry. I reached for my purse and found my car keys. Don't worry your pretty little head, I whispered to myself. Oh, Julius, you have no idea how much I am going to worry, and you have no idea what I am about to do. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The image of that car brochure burned in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ruby's handwriting, perfect for the new lifestyle. By the next afternoon, the exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I felt heavy. My house, usually my sanctuary, felt like a battlefield where I was the only one who didn't know the war had started. I needed to think, but I couldn't do it while they were hovering around me. Julius and Ruby had a routine. Around 2:00, they would retreat to the patio or the living room to look at their phones and ignore me. I decided to make myself invisible. I went into the sunroom. It's a small, glass-enclosed porch off the kitchen. I used to sit there with my husband to watch the cardinals in the feeder. I lay down on the wicker daybed and pulled a light Afghan over my legs. I wasn't planning to sleep, but I closed my eyes. I wanted them to think I was out of commission. I wanted to disappear. The house was quiet for a while. Then I heard the heavy footsteps of my son. The kitchen connects directly to the sunroom. There is a sliding glass door between them, and although I had pulled the vertical blinds shut, the glass is thin. You can hear everything if the house is silent. I heard the refrigerator door open. Then, the distinct pop of a cork being pulled from a bottle. My stomach tightened. I knew that sound. I have a wine rack above the fridge. Most of it is just table wine. $10 bottles I buy at the grocery store. But on the top row, dusty and untouched, was a bottle of Silver Oak Cabernet. My husband bought it for our 40th anniversary. We never got to drink it. He passed away 2 months before the date. I had saved it. I don't know what for. Maybe a special occasion. Maybe just to look at it and remember him. Finally, Ruby's voice drifted through the glass. I need a drink. She was hovering over me all morning while I was trying to watch my show. Relax, babe, Julius said. I heard the glug, glug, glug of the wine pouring into glasses. Large glasses. She's asleep. I saw her go into the sunroom an hour ago. She's out like a light. She's always asleep, Ruby scoffed. Or cleaning. Or staring at us. It's creepy, Julius. I feel like I'm living in a museum with a security guard. I lay perfectly still. My heart was hammering against my ribs, so hard I was afraid they would hear it. They were drinking his wine. They were drinking the last memory I had kept bottled up, and they didn't even care. It's good wine, though, Julius said. I could hear him smacking his lips. Must be expensive. Well, she can afford it, Ruby snapped. She's sitting on a gold mine here. Julius, do you know what homes in this neighborhood are going for? I looked on Zillow this morning. The place across the street sold for nearly $1 million, and she's just sitting in it. One old lady in a 4-bedroom house. It's selfish, really. I know, Julius said. His voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. I'm working on it. You've been saying that for weeks, Ruby complained. I heard a chair scrape against the floor as she sat down. We can't live like this forever. I can't handle her much longer. She asked me this morning why I don't do laundry. I'm not her maid. You won't have to handle her much longer, Julius said. The tone of his voice made my blood run cold. It wasn't the voice of my son. It was the voice of a businessman closing a deal. I called the lawyer today. Julius continued. He said the power of attorney paperwork is ready. We just need to get her to sign it. I'll tell her it's for, I don't know, updating the deed or something for taxes. She won't read it. She trusts me. She thinks I'm handling the bills. And once we have it, Ruby asked, Once we have it, we control the assets, Julius said. We can list the house. We can access the retirement accounts without her permission. But what about her? Ruby asked. She's not just going to leave. There's that facility off the highway, Julius said. Cedar Springs. I drove past it yesterday. I stopped breathing. I know Cedar Springs. Everyone in Naples knows Cedar Springs. It's the place you go when you have no money and no family. Who cares? It's the place where the state sends people to be forgotten. It smells like urine and despair. It is a warehouse for the dying. Is it nice? Ruby asked, though she didn't sound like she cared. It's adequate. Julius laughed darkly. And it's cheap. Medicaid will cover most of it once we drain her liquid assets. That leaves the profit from the house for us, for the business, for the new start, for the car, Ruby added. Exactly, Julius said. Just give it another month. We get the signature, we move the money, we move her out. Then we are free. Tears pricked my eyes, but they didn't fall. I felt something inside me break. It was a clean break, like a dry twig snapping. For 72 years, I have been a daughter, a wife, and a mother. I have always put others first. When Julius was a boy, I went without new clothes so he could have the best sneakers. When he needed tuition, we refinanced the house. I have spent my entire life protecting him, nurturing him, making excuses for him. But lying there on that wicker daybed, listening to him plan my demise over a glass of his dead father's wine, the mother in me died. She simply ceased to exist. And in her place, the protector woke up. But this time, I wasn't protecting him. I was protecting myself. They finished their wine. I heard the glasses clink in the sink. They didn't even wash them. Come on, Ruby said. Let's go to the mall. I want to look at those shoes again. If we're getting the money Friday, I want to be ready. Let me just grab the iPad, Julius said. I need to check the transfer status. Just do it later, Ruby whined. I want to get out of here before she wakes up and asks me to peel potatoes. Fine, Julius grunted. Let's go. I heard the garage door open and the rumble of their car engine fading down the street. I waited 5 full minutes. I counted the seconds. I needed to be sure they hadn't forgotten something and turned back. When I was sure the house was empty, I sat up. My joints were stiff, but I moved with a speed I didn't know I still had. I walked into the kitchen. The empty wine bottle was sitting on the counter, uncorked like a tombstone. I ignored it. I walked straight to the kitchen island where the family iPad sat charging. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from rage. I pressed the home button. Julius hadn't even closed his apps. He was so arrogant, so sure of my stupidity, that he left everything open. The screen lit up. It was already on the banking app. It wasn't my usual bank view. It was a view I rarely saw, the Transfers tab. And there it was, a pending transaction. Scheduled date, Friday, December 6th. Amount, $40,000 from Evelyn Caswell. Savings to Naples Luxury Imports memo. Down payment, $40,000. That was my emergency fund. That was the money for a new roof if a hurricane hit. That was the money for my hip surgery if I needed it. He wasn't waiting for the power of attorney for the car. He had found a way to do this now. He must have logged in as me. He knew my mother's maiden name. He knew my first pet. He knew the answers to the security questions because he was my son. He was stealing $40,000 in 48 hours. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Just give it another month, he had said. Then we get the house. No, Julius, you don't. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was Wednesday. The transfer was scheduled for Friday. Banks take time to process large transactions, especially suspicious ones. But if I didn't act now, that money would be gone, and once it was in the dealership's account, getting it back would be a legal nightmare I might not survive. I tapped the screen to close the app, wiping my fingerprint off the glass with the hem of my blouse. I placed the iPad back, exactly how I found it, at the slight angle near the fruit bowl. I needed to leave the house. I needed to go to the bank. But I couldn't let them know I knew. If I confronted them now, Julius would just talk his way out of it. Or worse, he might get physical. He was desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the confused old lady they thought I was. I went upstairs to my bedroom and dressed. I put on my nice slacks and a pearl necklace. I grabbed my purse. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked the same as she did yesterday. She had the same gray hair, the same wrinkles around her eyes. But the eyes themselves were different. They were cold. You want a new lifestyle, Ruby? I said to the empty room. You want to handle the finances, Julius? I snapped my purse shut. Be careful what you wish for. I walked out the door, got into my 10-year-old sedan, and backed out of the driveway. I wasn't going to play bridge. I was going to war. If hearing a son call his own mother's future cheap made your blood boil, you belong in this community. Please subscribe right now. I stood in the hallway for a moment, gripping my car keys until the metal bit into my palm. My heart was pounding, not from exertion, but from the performance I was about to give. They thought I was a confused, helpless old woman. Fine. I would give them exactly what they wanted to see. I walked into the living room. Julius was still on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. Ruby was flipping through a magazine, looking bored. I'm heading out, I said, making my voice sound light and airy. It's Wednesday. I'm going to play bridge with Martha and the girls. I might be late coming back. Julius didn't even look up from his screen. Okay, Mom. Drive safe. Watch out for the other drivers. I will, I said. Oh, and Julius? I think I might make a pot roast for dinner tonight. Would you like that? He finally looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He probably expected me to be sulking after our interaction yesterday. Yep, Mom. Pot roast sounds great. Perfect, I smiled. A genuine, sweet smile. I'll see you later. I walked out the door, got into my car, and backed out of the driveway. I waved as I passed the living room window, just in case they were watching. But as soon as I turned the corner onto the main road, the smile dropped from my face. I wasn't going to Martha's house. Martha moved to Arizona 2 years ago. I drove straight past the bridge club. I drove past the grocery store. I drove 5 miles across town to a bank I had never set foot in before. It was a competitor to my current bank. I needed a clean break. I needed an institution where Julius didn't know the tellers and didn't have a login. Walking into that new bank felt like walking into a sanctuary. The air conditioning was cool and crisp. I sat down with a young woman named Sarah. She looked about the same age as my granddaughter. I'd like to open a high-yield savings account. I told her, solely in my name, and I want to make sure there is absolutely no way anyone else can access it. No joint holders. No beneficiaries listed yet. Just me. We can certainly do that, Mrs. Caswell, she said politely. It took 30 minutes. When she handed me the paperwork and my new account number, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had a safe harbor. Now, I just needed to move the ship. I got back in my car and drove to my regular bank. This was the hard part. This was the bank where I had banked for 40 years. The tellers knew me. They knew Julius. They had given him lollipops when he was a toddler. I didn't go to the teller line. I walked straight to the glass office in the back. Gary, the branch manager, looked up and smiled when he saw me. He's a good man, about 50, always asks about my garden. Evelyn, he said, standing up, what brings you in today? Everything all right? I closed the door behind me and sat down. Gary, I need to make some changes. Immediate changes. And I need you to be discreet. The smile faded from his face. He sat down slowly. Of course. What's going on? I need to transfer the entirety of my savings account, I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had been in months. I want it wired to this new account number at First National. Gary looked at the paper I slid across the desk. All of it, Evelyn? That's a significant transfer. Is everything okay with the house? The house is fine, I said, but the people inside it are not. I also need to remove Julius as an authorized signer on my checking account. Immediately, Gary paused. He tapped his pen on the desk. Evelyn, if I remove him, his card won't work. Does he know you're doing this? No, I said, and that is the point. I also want you to cancel the overdraft protection on the joint checking account. Gary looked confused. Evelyn, if I do that, and he tries to spend more than what's in there, the transaction will just decline. It won't go through. Usually, people keep overdraft protection for emergencies. I know exactly what it does, Gary, I said. I looked him dead in the eye. I want the card to decline. I want it to stop dead. If he tries to buy a pack of gum, and there isn't money in there, I want the machine to say declined. Gary looked at me for a long moment. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw the hurt that had hardened into steel. He nodded, understanding more than he said. Okay, he typed into his computer. We can do that. I'm initiating the wire transfer for the savings now. $152,000. It will hit your new account within hours. Now, for the checking account. He clicked a few more buttons. I've removed him as a signer. I've canceled the overdraft. But Evelyn, you can't close the account completely without him present, since it's a joint account. I don't want to close it. I said, leave $5 in it. $5. Gary asked, $5. I repeated, enough to keep it open. Not enough to buy a Mercedes. Gary's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't ask. He printed the receipts. I signed the papers. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. It sounded like freedom. It's done, Gary said. You're safe, Evelyn. Thank you, Gary, I said. I stood up and shook his hand. If he comes in here screaming, call the police. I will, Gary promised. I walked out of that bank feeling 10 years younger. The sun seemed brighter. The humidity didn't bother me. I had done it. I had pulled the rug out from under them, and they were still standing there, completely unaware that they were already falling. I drove home slowly, enjoying the music on the radio. When I pulled into the driveway, it was late afternoon. Julius's car was there. I carried my purse into the house, tucking the bank receipts deep into the zippered inside pocket. I'm back. I called out. Did you win? Ruby yelled from the den. I certainly did. I muttered to myself. Louder, I said. I broke even, but it was nice to get out. I went into the kitchen and started on the roast. I peeled the potatoes with a rhythm. Chop, chop, chop. I seasoned the meat. I set the table with the good placemats. While the roast was cooking, the smell filling the house with warmth and comfort, Julius came into the kitchen to grab a beer. Smells good, Mom, he said. He seemed in a good mood. Why wouldn't he be? He thought he was getting $40,000 tomorrow. He thought he was 24 hours away from driving a luxury car. It will be ready in 20 minutes, I said. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the boy I had raised, the boy I had nursed through fevers. And now he was a stranger who planned to put me in a cheap nursing home. It broke my heart, but it didn't break my resolve. We sat down to dinner. I served them generous portions. I poured them wine from a cheap bottle, not the Silver Oak. So, Julius said, slicing into his beef. Do you have any plans for tomorrow, Mom? I knew why he was asking. He wanted to make sure I wouldn't be around when the transfer supposedly went through, or maybe he wanted to ensure I was home, so he could act surprised when the money disappeared. No plans, I said, taking a sip of water. I think I'll just stay here. Maybe do some gardening. Why? Just asking, he said quickly. Ruby and I have some errands to run in the morning. A few appointments. Oh, what kind of appointments? I asked innocently. Ruby kicked him under the table. I saw the tablecloth move. Just business stuff, Ruby said, smiling tightly. Boring stuff. You wouldn't be interested. Well, you two have fun, I said. I looked at Ruby. You know, Ruby, you were right about the house. It does need some updating. Maybe we can look at paint colors next week. Ruby's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She looked at Julius, confused. Really? She asked. Sure. I beamed. If we're all going to live here together, we should all be happy. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About changes. I saw a look pass between them. It was a look of pure victory. They thought I had finally cracked. They thought I was rolling over. They thought they had won the game. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, I walked past the living room archway. They didn't see me. I told you, Ruby whispered to Julius. She's totally out of it. Did you hear her? She wants to look at paint colors. She has no clue what's happening. It's perfect, Julius whispered back. Tomorrow is going to be the best day of our lives. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the faucet so they wouldn't hear me laugh. Oh, Julius, tomorrow is going to be a day you never forget, but not for the reason you think. I dried the last plate and put it away. I checked the lock on the back door. I turned off the lights. I went to bed, and for the first time in 3 months, I slept like a baby. The trap was set. The bait was laid. And tomorrow, the predators were going to find out what happens when they bite the hand that feeds them. Friday morning arrived with a bright, relentless sun. It was the kind of Florida morning that promised heat, the kind that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. Inside my house, the energy was frantic. Julius and Ruby were up earlier than usual. I sat at the kitchen island with my coffee, watching them scurry around like children on Christmas morning. They were dressed to impress. Julius was wearing his navy blue suit, the one I bought him for his cousin's wedding 3 years ago. It was a little tight around the waist now, but he thought he looked like a millionaire. Ruby was wearing a white linen dress and oversized sunglasses, even though she was still inside the house. They looked like people who belonged in a Mercedes-Benz showroom. They looked like success. It was almost impressive how well they played the part, considering they didn't have a dime to their names. You two look sharp, I said, taking a sip of my black coffee. Big day. Julius adjusted his tie in the reflection of the microwave. Huge day, Mom. A game changer. We have a meeting with some potential investors. Big time stuff. Investors, I repeated. Well, that sounds promising. It's more than promising, Ruby chimed in. She was reapplying her lipstick for the 3rd time. It's a done deal. We just have to go sign the papers. I watched her cap the lipstick. Sign the papers. I see. They were so confident. They had the swagger of people who had already won the lottery. They didn't know the ticket was fake. We might be late coming back, Julius said, checking his watch. It was the new watch again. We might go out for a celebratory lunch afterwards. Don't wait up for us. I won't, I said. I have plenty to keep me busy here. They headed for the door. Julius grabbed his keys, the keys to his rusty sedan that he had parked down the street so the neighbors wouldn't see it. Today, he thought, was the last time he'd have to drive it. By Evelyn. Ruby called out, not even looking back. Wish us luck. Good luck, I said. You're going to need it. The door slammed shut. I heard them laughing as they walked down the driveway. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The silence wasn't lonely today. It felt heavy with anticipation, like the air before a thunderstorm. I looked at the clock. It was 10:30. It would take them 20 minutes to get to the dealership, maybe an hour to test drive the car, just to show off. Then they would sit down in the finance office. The salesman would offer them espresso or sparkling water. They would laugh and talk about lifestyle and upgrades. Then, the finance manager would turn the computer screen toward them. He would ask for the card for the down payment. I poured myself a second cup of coffee. I waited. 11 o'clock passed. Then 11:30. At 12:15, my phone rang. The sound shattered the silence. I looked at the screen. It was Julius. I didn't answer on the first ring. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to sit in that plush leather chair in front of the finance manager and wonder why his mother wasn't picking up. On the 4th ring, I swiped the green button. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm, casual. "Mom." Julius's voice was breathless. It was a harsh whisper, frantic and tight. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here, Julius." "Why are you whispering? How is the meeting with the investors?" "Forget the investors," he hissed. "Mom, there's a problem. A glitch. I'm at the dealership." "The dealership?" I asked. "I thought you had a business meeting." "I do. We're buying a car for the business." "Look, that's not important right now. I'm trying to put down the deposit." And the card declined. Declined? I took a slow sip of coffee. "Which card?" "The joint card. The debit card." It said insufficient funds. "But that's impossible." I saw the transfer pending on the iPad. $40,000. It was supposed to clear this morning. I could hear the panic rising in his throat. I could hear the background noise, the soft chatter of a showroom, the ring of a telephone. "Mom, listen to me," he said, his voice getting louder, losing the whisper. "You need to call the bank right now. There's a fraud hold or something. Tell them to authorize the charge. The finance guy is staring at me. It's embarrassing." "Who is staring at you?" I asked. "The manager." "Mom, please. Just call Gary. Tell him to lift the hold. Put me on speaker so I can hear you do it." "You want me on speaker?" I asked. "Yes. Just fix it." "All right," I said. "Am I on speaker now?" Yes, you're on speaker. The manager is right here. Just tell him it's a mistake." I took a deep breath. I imagined the scene. Julius in his tight suit, sweating. Ruby in her white dress, gripping her purse. The finance manager in his expensive tie, waiting for the money. I spoke clearly. I spoke loudly. I made sure every syllable was crisp. "There is no mistake, Julius." The line went silent for a second. "What?" Julius laughed nervously. "Mom, don't joke. The machine said declined." "I know it did," I said. "I went to the bank yesterday." "Julius, I saw the transfer you set up. $40,000 to Naples Luxury Imports." "Mom, I canceled it." I said. My voice was hard now. "I moved my savings to a new bank. I removed you from the checking account, and I canceled the overdraft protection." "You what?" "You have $5 in that account, Julius." I said. $5? That is all you have?" "No," he stammered. "No, you can't do that. That's our money. That's family money." "It is my money," I corrected him. "It is the money your father and I saved. It is the money you planned to use to put me in a nursing home." "I never." "I heard you," I shouted, letting my anger finally bleed into the phone. "I heard you in the kitchen. Cheap facility. Get the house." I heard every word. There was a commotion on the other end. I heard a chair scrape loudly against the floor. Then I heard Ruby. Her voice was shrill, piercing through the phone speaker like a siren. She stole it. Ruby was screaming. I could hear her clearly now. She must have grabbed the phone or leaned in close. You crazy old witch. You stole our future. That was our money. We have a contract. You have nothing. I told her. You have no money. You have no house. And you have no car. Sir, please lower your voice. I heard a deep voice say in the background. That must be the manager. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the office. Mom, fix this. Julius yelled. He was desperate now. The facade was gone. They're kicking us out. Fix it. I did fix it, I said. I fixed the problem of you stealing from me. How are we supposed to get home? He shouted. We drove the old car to the scrapyard. We thought we were driving the Mercedes home. I almost laughed. Of course they did. They were so arrogant. They scrapped their only mode of transportation before they even signed the papers. I hope you kept $5 for gas, I said. Or maybe you can walk. You said my knees were bad. Julius, how are yours? I'm coming home, he threatened. I'm coming home, and we are going to settle this. Don't bother, I said. The locks are changed, and if you bang on the door, I'm calling the police. You can't do this. Ruby screamed. I'll sue you. I tapped the red button. The line went dead. The silence rushed back into the kitchen, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was victorious. I stood up. My hands were steady. I walked to the front door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I went to the back door. Click. I checked the windows. All secured. They were coming. I knew they were coming. They would find a ride, or they would take an Uber with whatever credit they had left on their own maxed-out cards. They would be here in 20 minutes, red-faced and screaming. Let them come. I wasn't the confused old lady anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was the owner of this house, the owner of my life. And for the first time in a long time, I was completely, wonderfully in charge. I went to the fridge and poured myself a glass of cold water. I sat in the living room, facing the front door, and waited for the show to begin. Did you smile when that card declined? If you felt that justice, you need to subscribe so we can bring you more stories like this. If you are leaving now without subscribing, are you saying Evelyn was too harsh? Go to the comments and explain to me why you think an ungrateful son deserves a luxury car while his mother pays for it. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes after I hung up the phone, a beat-up sedan pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a Mercedes. It was a rideshare, one of those cars with a sticker in the window and a dent in the bumper. I watched from the slat in the living room blinds. I saw Julius get out first. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie was loose, and his face was a color of red I had never seen before. It was the color of humiliation mixed with rage. Ruby scrambled out of the other side. She tripped slightly on her high heels, recovered, and slammed the car door so hard I heard it from inside the house. They didn't walk up the driveway. They marched. I moved away from the window and stood in the hallway about 5 feet back from the front door. I clasped my hands in front of me to stop them from shaking. I wasn't shaking from fear anymore. I was shaking from adrenaline. The first pound on the door sounded like a gunshot. Bam, bam, bam. Open the door. Julius screamed. His voice was muffled by the heavy oak, but the anger vibrated through the wood. Mom, open this door right now. I didn't answer. I stood my ground. Bam, bam, bam. I know you're in there. Ruby yelled. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the heavy afternoon heat. Don't play games with us. Evelyn, open the damn door. I walked up to the door. I didn't unlock it. I didn't undo the chain. I leaned close to the wood so they could hear me, but I kept the barrier firm between us. Go away, Julius, I said loudly. You are not welcome here. Not welcome. Julius laughed, a crazy, desperate sound. I live here. My stuff is in there. You can't just lock me out of my own house. It is not your house, I said clearly. It is my house. The deed is in my name. You were a guest, and your invitation has expired. Open the door, or I'm going to break it down. Julius shouted. If you damage my property, I said, I will add it to the list of things you owe me. I heard Ruby say something to him, something quiet and venomous, and then she stepped up to the door. I could hear her breathing hard on the other side. Evelyn, she said, trying to sound reasonable but failing. Her tone was patronizing, dripping with fake concern. Listen to me. We know you're confused. We know you're not thinking clearly. This is a big misunderstanding. You're having an episode. Just let us in, and we can call the doctor. We can get you some help. An episode. That was their angle. They were going to play the senile old lady card right here on the porch. I am not confused, Ruby, I said. My mind is sharper than it has been in months. You stole $40,000. Ruby screamed, losing her patience instantly. You stole from your own family. That money was for us. It was for our future. How can you be so selfish? You're an old woman. What do you need money for? You're supposed to help your children. I did help him, I said. I gave him a home for 3 months. I fed him. I paid the bills. And how did you repay me? We were taking care of you. Ruby shrieked. We were managing your life because you're too old to do it yourself. You're senile, Evelyn. You're losing it. Everyone knows it. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I am not senile, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly calm. I was smart enough to check the iPad. I was smart enough to hear you yesterday. The pounding stopped. The silence on the porch was sudden. I heard you in the kitchen. I continued, speaking to the closed door. I heard you drinking my husband's wine. I heard you talking about the power of attorney. Mom, you misunderstood. Julia stammered. We were just talking about options. I heard you talking about Cedar Springs. I said, I let those 2 words hang in the air. Cedar Springs. I heard you say it was cheap. I said, I heard you say you would dump me in the facility off the highway so you could take the house. I heard you say you just needed another month. There was no response. They knew. They knew I had caught them red-handed. There was no spinning this. There was no misunderstanding a plan to institutionalize your own mother for profit. You weren't taking care of me, I said. You were waiting for me to die. And since I wasn't dying fast enough, you decided to bury me alive in a nursing home. You ungrateful bee, Ruby started, but Julius cut her off. Open the door. Julius roared. He lost all control. He wasn't trying to manipulate me anymore. He was trying to intimidate me. I need my things. I need my laptop. Open it. I heard a heavy thud. He kicked the door. The frame rattled, and dust fell from the top jamb. Julius stopped. Ruby yelled, but not because she cared about the door. She was looking around. I looked through the peephole. Across the street, Mrs. Gable was standing on her lawn with her phone in her hand. 2 houses down, Mr. Henderson had stopped mowing his lawn and was staring. In Naples, people value their privacy. A screaming match in the middle of the day draws attention. They're watching. Ruby hissed at him. Julius, stop kicking the door. I don't care. Julius screamed. He kicked it again. Harder this time. She has my money. She ruined everything. Open up, Mom. I'm warning you. I stepped back from the door. I wasn't afraid of him coming in. The deadbolt was solid brass. My husband installed it himself. It would hold. I'm done warning you, Julius. I shouted. I'm not leaving until I get in, he yelled. He pounded his fist against the wood, a rhythmic, violent thudding. You have 5 seconds to get off my porch, I said. Or what? He taunted. What are you going to do? You're an old lady all alone in there. I'm not alone, I said. I looked at my phone. The call had been connected for 2 minutes. I had muted myself, but the operator had heard everything. I unmuted the line. Dispatch. I said clearly, are the officers close? They are turning onto your street now, Mrs. Caswell. The operator's voice said, calm and reassuring. I looked back at the door. I called Sheriff Miller 10 minutes ago. Julius, I said. I told him there were intruders trying to break down my door. I told him I felt threatened. You called the cops on your own son? Julius sounded shocked. The pounding stopped. I called the cops on a man who tried to rob me. I said, and if you are still on my porch when they get here, you are going to jail. Let's go, Ruby said. Her voice was panicked now. Julius, let's go. We can't be here when they come. You have a warrant for those unpaid parking tickets in Miami. Remember? Let's go. I can't believe this, Julius muttered. My own mother. You stopped being my son when you signed those papers to steal my savings, I said. Now get off my property. For a second, nobody moved. Then, in the distance, faint but growing louder, came the sound that ends all arguments. Wail, wail, wail. Sirens. Run. Ruby screamed. I heard their footsteps scrambling off the porch. I heard the car door slam. I heard the engine of the rideshare, which had apparently waited, probably because they hadn't paid him yet, rev up and peel away from the curb. I didn't open the door. I walked to the window and peeked through the blinds, just in time to see the flashing blue lights of the sheriff's cruiser turn the corner. They were gone. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window. My heart was still racing, beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands were trembling again. It wasn't triumph I felt in that moment. It was a deep, aching sadness. I had won. I was safe. But I had just watched my son, the boy I used to tuck in at night, try to kick down my door to get at my money. I took a deep breath, straightened my blouse, and unlocked the deadbolt to greet the sheriff. I had to be strong. The war wasn't over yet. This was just the first battle, and I was the last woman standing. Evelyn stood her ground against the people trying to destroy her. If you support women protecting their homes, prove it by subscribing right now. If you don't subscribe, I have to assume you're on Julius's side. If that's the case, be brave enough to go to the comments and tell us why you wouldn't lock the door on someone trying to rob you. Sheriff Miller was a kind man, but he was a firm man. He stood in my foyer with his arms crossed, watching as Julius and Ruby frantically threw clothes into garbage bags. Essentials only, the sheriff had told them. Clothes, toiletries, medications. You can come back for the rest when you have a civil officer present or a moving truck arranged through Mrs. Caswell's attorney. Right now, you are leaving. I sat in my armchair in the living room. I didn't help them pack. For 3 months, I had cooked their meals, washed their laundry, and cleaned up their messes. Today, I just watched. It was pathetic, really. Without the bravado, without the arrogance of thinking they owned the place, they looked small. Julius was sweating through his suit. He kept muttering under his breath, shaking his head like he was the victim of a great injustice. Ruby was worse. She was trying to loot the place on her way out. I watched her walk toward the mantelpiece. She reached for the silver picture frame, the one with a photo of Julius as a baby. It was sterling silver, an antique. Put it back, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. Ruby froze. She looked at the sheriff, then at me. It's a picture of my husband, she snapped. It belongs to us. The photo is of my son. I corrected her. But the frame is mine. Take the photo if you want. Leave the silver. Ruby glared at me with pure hatred. She ripped the back off the frame, snatched the photo, and slammed the silver frame back onto the mantel so hard it rattled. "Let's go, folks," Sheriff Miller said, checking his watch. "I don't have all day." They dragged their trash bags to the door. Julius stopped in front of me. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a threat. But he looked at the gun on the sheriff's hip and thought better of it. "You're making a mistake, Mom," he said quietly. "You're going to regret this. You're going to be all alone." I was already alone, Julius. I told him. I was alone in a house full of people who wanted me gone. He flinched. He walked out the door, and Ruby followed him. The sheriff gave me a nod and closed the door behind them. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain. And then I sat down and cried. Not because I missed them, but because it had come to this. A mother shouldn't have to evict her child to survive. But the peace didn't last long. You see, manipulative people don't just leave. They regroup. They spin the narrative. They launch a smear campaign. 2 days later, my phone started ringing. It wasn't Julius. It was everyone else. First, it was my sister-in-law, Linda. Linda lives in Ohio and hasn't visited in 5 years, but suddenly she was very concerned about my well-being. "Evelyn," she said when I answered, her voice high and pitchy. "Oh, thank God you answered." Julius called me. He was crying. "Evelyn," he said, "you threw them out on the street?" He said you were confused. "I am not confused, Linda," I said, gripping the phone tight. "He said you were having episodes," she continued, ignoring me. "He said you were paranoid. He told me you accused him of stealing?" "Evelyn, honey, Julius would never steal from you. He loves you. He was staying there to protect you. He was staying here to put me in a nursing home," I said flatly. "Oh, stop it," Linda scoffed. "See? That's the paranoia talking. Julius said you've been forgetting things. He thinks you might have been scammed by someone online, and now you're blaming him because you're ashamed. Is that it? Did you send money to a scammer? Evelyn?" I felt the blood rush to my face. Julius was smart. He knew that if he told people I was losing it, anything I said about him stealing would just sound like the ravings of a senile old woman. He was using my age against me. "I didn't send money to anyone, Linda," I said. "I stopped Julius from transferring $40,000 to a Mercedes dealership. I saw the transfer. I saw the iPad." Well, Linda sighed, clearly not believing me. Even if there was a misunderstanding about money, you can't just kick family out. It's cruel. He's your son. What would your husband say? That was a low blow. "My husband would have shot him for trying to rob me," I said. "And if you are so worried about Julius, Linda, you take him in. You have a guest room. Send him a plane ticket." There was silence on the other line. "Well, we're renovating right now," she stammered. "It's not a good time." "That's what I thought," I said. "Don't tell me how to handle my intruders if you aren't willing to house them." I hung up. Then came the texts. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade. My niece. All of them asking if I was okay, sending links to memory care specialists, telling me I needed to forgive and forget. It was a barrage. It was an assault. It's called flying monkeys, when a narcissist sends other people to do their dirty work to guilt trip you into submission. I wanted to scream. I wanted to explain myself to every single one of them. I wanted to send them screenshots of the bank transfer. But I realized something important. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the comfortable lie. It was easier for them to believe poor Evelyn is getting old than to accept Julius is a predator. So I stopped answering. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I got in my car and drove to my lawyer's office. Mr. Henderson has been my attorney for 20 years. He is expensive, but he is worth every penny. I sat in his leather chair and laid it all out. I want a formal eviction notice served. I told him, I don't want them claiming they have squatters' rights or tenancy because they stayed for 3 months. I want it legal. I want them barred from the property. We can do that, Mr. Henderson said, taking notes. And the finances? I want a restraining order regarding my assets, I said, and I want to update my estate plan. If something happens to me tomorrow, I want to make sure Julius doesn't get a dime. Not the house. Not the savings. Nothing. Mr. Henderson looked at me over his glasses. Evelyn, this is a drastic step. Disinheriting a child is permanent. Are you sure you won't change your mind once things cool down? I thought about the brochure in the trash. I thought about the cheap facility off the highway. I thought about the look on Ruby's face when she tried to steal the silver frame. I almost lost my life, Mr. Henderson. I said, not my heartbeat, but my life. My freedom. If I had been nice for one more week, I would be in a shared room at Cedar Springs smelling like bleach, and they would be driving a Mercedes to my funeral. I leaned forward. I am not changing my mind. I am protecting my future. Understood, he said. I signed the papers. Driving home, the adrenaline finally faded. I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark. There was no car blocking the garage. There was no TV blaring from the living room. I walked inside. It was quiet. For the last 3 months, I had complained about the noise. I had hated the intrusion, but now the silence felt heavy. It echoed. I made a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table. Just me. I looked at the empty chair where Julius used to sit. It is a terrible thing to realize you raised a wolf. You spend your whole life trying to be a good mother, trying to teach them right from wrong. You give them love. You give them support. And then one day they look at you and they don't see a person. They see a paycheck. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like dust. It was lonely. I won't lie. It hurts to be the villain in your own family's story. It hurts to know they are out there right now, telling everyone how terrible I am. But then I looked around my kitchen. It was my kitchen. The thermostat was set to 75. The money was safe in the bank. I could wake up tomorrow and do whatever I wanted. I was lonely, but I was safe. And as I sat there in the quiet, I realized that lonely is a price I am willing to pay for free. For a week, the silence in my house was absolute. I didn't leave the property. I had my groceries delivered. I kept the blinds drawn. I felt like a captain of a ship sailing through a thick fog, waiting for something to crash into the hull. I knew Julius wasn't done. Men like him, men who feel the world owes them a living, don't just walk away. They scheme. They stew. They look for a weak link in the fence. On Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang. I didn't rush to answer it. I checked the camera feed on my phone first. It wasn't Julius. It wasn't the sheriff. It was a young woman with long brown hair, standing nervously on the welcome mat, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. It was Sophie, my granddaughter, Julius's 24-year-old daughter. I hadn't seen Sophie in 2 years. She lived in Orlando, working 2 jobs, trying to pay off her student loans. She was the one good thing Julius had ever helped create, mostly because her mother, Julius's first wife, had raised her right before leaving him. I opened the door, but I didn't unlock the screen. I stood there, staring at her through the mesh. "Grandma," she said. Her voice was small. She looked tired. She had my eyes. "Hello, Sophie," I said. I didn't smile. I couldn't afford to let my guard down, not even for her. "What are you doing here?" I drove down to see you," she said. "Dad called me. He said things were bad." "He did he?" I tightened my grip on the door handle. And did he send you here? Sophie looked down at her sneakers. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. You can tell him the answer is no, I said. You can tell him the police are still a phone call away. Go home, Sophie. I started to close the door. Wait, Sophie yelled. She stepped forward and pressed her hand against the screen. Grandma, please. I'm not here to help him. I promise. I need to show you something. I looked at her face. There were tears welling up in her eyes. Real tears. Not the crocodile tears her father cried when he wanted money. She looked scared. I unlocked the screen door. Come in, but leave your bag on the porch. She nodded and stepped inside. She looked around the living room, noticing the empty spaces where Ruby had moved things around. We sat at the kitchen table. I didn't offer her tea. I wanted this to be quick. Talk, I said. Sophie reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking. Dad called me 3 days ago, she whispered. He was screaming. He told me you had lost your mind. He said you had stolen his inheritance and that you were going to give it all away to a scammer. I figured he would say that. I said, he told me I had to come down here. Sophie continued. He said since you trust me, I should come visit. He wanted me to get into the house. He wanted me to find your checkbook, or at least find a bank statement, so he could get the account numbers. My stomach turned. He was using his own daughter as a spy. He was trying to turn her into a thief. And I asked, are you going to look for my checkbook? No, Sophie said firmly. She looked up at me, and I saw a flash of anger in her eyes that matched my own. I told him no. I told him that was crazy. He got really mad. She tapped the screen of her phone. He left me a voicemail yesterday after I refused to drive down here immediately. I think you need to hear it. I want you to know exactly who he is, so you know I'm not lying. She pressed play and set the phone on the table. The voice that came out of the tiny speaker was distorted, but unmistakably Julius. It wasn't the smooth, charming voice he used in public. It was a growl. Sophie, don't be an idiot. She's a senile old bat. She doesn't need that money. She's going to be dead in 5 years anyway. And if we don't act now, the state is going to take it all. Just go down there, act sweet, and get the routing number. If you don't, you can forget about me helping you with your car payments. Stop being self-righteous and help the family. She owes us this. The message ended. The kitchen was silent. He doesn't help me with my car payments. Sophie said quietly, I pay for everything myself. He just likes to pretend he has power over me. She pushed the phone away. I drove down here to tell you that I blocked his number, Grandma, and to tell you to change your locks again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry he's doing this to you. I looked at this young woman. She had driven 3 hours to warn me. She had defied her father, risking his rage, to protect me. The ice around my heart finally cracked. Oh, honey, I said. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold. You are not like him. I try not to be, she sniffled. You stay for lunch, I said, and bring your bag inside. You can stay the night if you want, but we are changing the Wi-Fi password, so he can't track your location. We spent the afternoon talking, not about Julius, but about her life, her job at the veterinary clinic, her dreams of going back to school. For the first time in months, I laughed. I remembered what it felt like to be a grandmother, not a bank. The next morning, I called Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. I need another appointment, I said. I'm bringing my granddaughter. We sat in his office, the same office where I had ordered the eviction just days before. Mr. Henderson, I said, I want to set up a living trust. A wise choice, he nodded. It avoids probate. It keeps your assets private, so family members can't snoop through public court records. Exactly, I said. I want to transfer the deed of the house and all my bank accounts into the trust. I will be the trustee for as long as I am alive and able. I want full control. If I need to spend every dime on my own care, I will. And the beneficiaries? He asked. I looked at Sophie. She was sitting in the corner, reading a magazine. She hadn't asked for a thing. She had actually tried to pay for our breakfast that morning. Upon my passing, I said, I want the house sold. The proceeds, along with any remaining funds in the accounts, will be split. 70% will go to Sophie Caswell to be used for her education or a home of her own. Sophie looked up, her eyes wide. Grandma, no, I don't need. Hush, I said. I'm not done. I turned back to the lawyer. The other 30% will go to the Naples Humane Society. They take better care of strays than my son took care of his mother. Mr. Henderson smiled, a genuine smile. And Julius? Julius, I said, leaning back in the leather chair, is to be explicitly disinherited. I want a clause stating that I have intentionally omitted him, not out of error, but due to his conduct. If he tries to contest the trust, the legal fees will come out of the estate, and he will still get nothing. It's bulletproof, Mr. Henderson said. I'll draft it today. Leaving that office, I felt lighter than air. The final string was cut. Julius could scream, he could sue, he could cry to the relatives, but he could not touch me. I had built a fortress around my life, and I had handed the key to the only person who deserved it. Sophie stayed for 2 days. When she left, I gave her a check. Not a huge one, but enough to cover her rent for 3 months so she could focus on studying. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered, for believing me. Thank you for telling the truth, I said. Tonight, I am sitting in my sunroom, the same sunroom where I heard the betrayal that started it all. But the air feels different now. It's cool. It's clean. I have a cup of coffee in my hand. Through the window, the Florida sky is painting itself in shades of purple and gold. The palm trees are swaying in the breeze. It is quiet. Some people might say I'm a hard woman. They might say a mother should forgive, no matter what. They might say I should have given him another chance. But those people haven't heard their son pricing out nursing homes like he was shopping for a used car. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot and strong. I saved my money. I saved my house. But most importantly, I saved my dignity. I refused to be a victim in my own life story. I am 72 years old. I have my health. I have a granddaughter who loves me. And I have $5 in a checking account that Julius will never, ever be able to access. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, signaling the end of the day. And the end of the drama. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the